agents is not all-knowing and all-powerful. When someone has a hammer, everything to them is a nail. Same thing goes to agent as well. At the end of the day, it is just a word prediction model, that predict the next word. That's why we have something called the crash test. Just try to break it and try to hit it until it fails.
Hi everybody, welcome back to ATxEnterprise Tech Unpacked. Now in this episode of the podcast, we are unpacking what Agentic AI actually means inside of a bank and the 3 things every enterprise must pay attention to before going to production. From the landscape of agents in banking to the misconceptions about what an agent actually is, to balancing cost, security, and performance. Of course, putting your agent to the crash test as well. How do you drive your agent up the wall till the breaking point? I think these are very interesting questions. So to tell us a little bit more about the process of this in the banking industry, we've invited George Wong, who is the Senior Data Scientist at AEON Bank Malaysia, working on the front line of where Agentic AI meets a regulated banking workflow. George, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here, Adrian.
Let me get a little bit more of a sensing in terms of the banking industry and AI. If you could just kind of give me a sense of how agents are actually deployed, employed, or even built in the banking industry.
Understood. So I think before we even go into there, right, we gotta understand what an agent is, right? We gotta understand based on what it is not. So just give you an example. Your typical traditional software or your chatbot of the past, those are not agents because they don't behave the same way. So when we say agents, it's something where those traditional systems infuse with the ability to reason and plan. And all of that comes from the LLM that is powering it. So that makes up the agent itself. And they are able to work on very complex problems, work with each other to achieve goals and also to break down problems and achieve them. And in banking itself, right now, I think in AEON Bank, what we're doing is trying to help the users to be more financially literate, so to understand more about their finances, how they can manage their finances much more better. And we have these agents deployed as well on the front end side to help them to do that.
Okay, so AEON Bank is currently using these agents purely or primarily, I would say, for customer facing or customer services in that sense?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Okay, great. Now, what's very interesting here is that because this is built in-house, I would say, right? And I think offline we were talking about it. Yeah, it's AI is great for scaling. We agree. It's great for scaling. But then when you flip it around, right, whenever we scale, it also means that there are problems. By comparison, the rate of scaling is also equivalent to the rate of exposing cracks. Do you agree to that?
I agree to that. Yeah. You can uncover more stuff, when you expose it to more users in the real world.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, in the banking industry, I'm just wondering, what are the things that were exposed, right? I'm going to circle back to that later. So for those who are listening, you're going to have to wait for a little while, okay? Before we get into that, I'd like to pick your brain on this. What are the common misconceptions of an agent? Since we were talking about the definition of it, currently, what are the misconceptions? And let's set the record straight.
2 points. The first point is that agents is not all-knowing and all-powerful. I think a lot of people might sell it as so. They might say, put agents to everything, right? When someone has a hammer, everything to them is a nail. So same thing goes to agent as well. Some people would just apply it to everything. But we know, as we develop and also implement it in the real world, we know that agents are not that all-powerful. At the end of the day, it is just a word prediction model, that predict the next word. So it doesn't know, it doesn't have empathy, it doesn't know the entire context of the problems that you're dealing with unless you give it to it. So first thing point is it's not all-powerful. Second point is they make mistake as well. They hallucinate. You need to find a way to stop that. They say things that they even themselves don't know, right? For example, right, you could ask an LLM to count how many R's in a strawberry. It cannot do that because technically it's going forward. It cannot go back to count how many R there are in a strawberry. So these are some of the tests that people has done to expose, LLMs.
That's
Yeah.
very interesting. On the first point, I was just listening to the conference yesterday, right, here at ATX Enterprise, and a line really popped out for me, which was the dumber your agent is, the less likely it is to hallucinate. Which is because it's innate in the programming in itself, right? So which means that if it's built to be creative, the chances of hallucination are actually higher. Which I thought, okay, that makes sense, right? Because the pool of your data is actually limited versus one that's actually a little bit more free flowing. And of course, the second point that you brought up is it's very insightful because once again we're trying to build agents around to do the things that we want it to do. But funny thing is, it becomes a point of frustration where we can't get it to do what we want it to do.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's not human. A human, even a child itself, maybe you just have to teach it a couple of times to say the word apple or dada. It understands that. But an agent is not human. It
Yeah.
is not capable of thinking. What it does is just doing word prediction in the best possible manner.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I remember when it came to Gen AI, right?
Hmm.
Images, for example. Just like the point of strawberry, I did not know about the strawberry one, but I did hear about this test where if you told the Gen AI to generate an image of water overflowing from a glass,
Okay.
it cannot show water overflowing. It can give you half. It can never generate the image of glass to the brim.
I want to do that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
will always give you a full or half, but it cannot give you to the brim because all the pictures that it finds on the internet is a full glass is always up to that point. A full glass of wine is never to the brim.
I
So
see.
it's quite interesting.
I like those aha moments. Like aha.
Yeah, I
I
caught
will
you.
not. I got you. I won't be replaced by you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
like
yeah.
those kind of stuff.
Banter aside, now, I think we're back to the topic, right, of how enterprises are actually trying to get the best out of their agents, especially in your position in Aeon. What were the top three things, right, that the enterprises were looking for when it came to getting the most out of the agents?
So we look at three key things. First thing first, performance. Second thing is the security, and third is cost. At the end of the day, as a digital bank in Malaysia, serving the Malaysian people, and we're still a very small bank. So a lot of things we need to take care of and do it well so that we can, maybe rise to the top. And I think the key point is that we want to serve our community better to help more users to be more financial literate and to get more access to these banking services for those unbanked. So that's why we focus on these three key things where the agents must perform well in terms of the performance, how relevant it is, the output is providing for the user, whether or not the advices make sense, whether or not the insight makes sense, and cost-wise, every call that the user do is gonna burn from our wallet, and we gotta optimize for that while still providing them great services. I think the last point would be the security. We don't want the agents when they are in the real world, causing harm to the user, providing wrong advice, or even asking the user to get something from the competitor. So
Security. I'd love to get your take on the guardrails that Aeon has set. Because I think coming from the finance industry or the banking industry, those guardrails may differ very much from other enterprises. What are those that probably you keep a very close eye on?
I think one of the speakers earlier mentioned that in this region, it is the hardest to do agentic, mainly because different countries like Indonesia, Thailand, has their own cultural sensitive things that we need to care about. Because we are an Islamic bank, we are caught between a stone and a very hard place. One thing first, we need to take care about the financial regulation. That's very hard already. On top of that, we gotta take care of Islamic banking. So that's why the guardrails have to be able to handle these two key things. Take care of the users. After taking care of the user, whether the advisors are what we call Sharia compliant or not, are they fulfilling Islamic financial principles? So these are the two key things that we look at. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Um, then after that, we move into cost. Now, a lot of the time, right, if we start cutting cost, I think that's an operational challenge, right? Okay, is it contributing or is it really burning us in that sense? I'm just wondering what the justification is and what more CTOs or CIOs are actually putting in as milestones to understand whether or not this is making or breaking us.
Understood. So what I believe in, right, I think a lot of the CTOs believe in as well, you cannot toss money at this and then expect it to perform at the best possible level. You got to find ways to optimize for it, optimize the the cost that you incur and how much value you can bring from the LLM itself. So one of the example is that we always look at how much token are being consumed and optimize for that. And you get a secondary output from this is that when you optimize your token calls, you also actually improve in terms of the speed that you get from the responses or the latency of the agent as well. So we always wanted to optimize for that. So best of all, you optimize for cost, you get lower cost, and you also get faster speed. And especially in banking, uh, you can use the best model, the most expensive model, but if it's not safe, it's actually useless.
That,
So we
that is very
always
true.
want to put safety at the number one point for our users. Yeah.
Right, that is very true. Now, interesting that you brought up about the tokens because the future is going to be a token economy. That's for sure. You know, because AI models are going to come, more AI models are coming up, more AI agents are going to be used, and tokens are just going to be consumed. It's going to become a currency in itself, right? Is this something? How do you think that this is actually going to be forecasted? I mean, from your perspective, you'd be able to give a forecast of, oh, this is the X number of tokens that we do consume, and year on year, it's only going to grow this much. Do you have a certain rate of growth or estimate for others to consider?
Yes, we do because that is the most important thing when we are building Neko Sensei. Uh, so always, I guess, for the enterprise out there, you gotta have like a benchmark or baseline prompt that you use that you can for sure know how much token is being incurred, how much does that cost. From there, once you have the baseline, then everything is much more simpler. Then you will know which part is the bottleneck, which part you can optimize for, uh, which part of the agent tool calls that you can optimize, cut down, or you might even remove agents entirely just to save on token. And you find that, oh, it's much more relevant to remove that agent when answering questions like those. So it's good that you need to have the first baseline first, measure that, find a way to measure that, and and a lot of tools out there, right? They actually cannot provide how much cost in terms of token that you're actually incurring. It's very hard thing to measure. Even when people care about it so much, all these tools actually is quite vague in telling you that. So you can only set a very strong baseline, take that up, and then follow through with that.
That's very interesting. It sounds like even your department at Aeon has to do budgeting now.
Yeah, yeah. we have
This
to.
is not my job scope,
We have. Yeah,
but
yeah,
it is going to be part of your job scope. In fact, it already is part of your job scope, isn't it?
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Every call incurred cost, so we gotta optimize for that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's really interesting. And do you feel that this is something that is on a very steady trajectory, or do you think that there's going to be a dip over time? I mean, there's got to be some cooling measure somewhere, right? I mean, we're not talking about property, but with every currency, there has to be some form of cooling. What's your take on that?
To be honest with you, I really cannot provide advice on that, and yeah, I really don't know about this. I hope there is some tools out there that could help us to measure token much better and helping us to optimize for it, if there's a way. Yeah.
Right. Okay, and the final point that you had earlier was on performance, or at least technically it was the first point that you mentioned, which was on performance. Two parts to this question. Number one is, first off, I want to ask you, are we talking about the internal stakeholders or the customers when we talk about performance?
So the performance will be on the external customer. Yeah, it's the customer that are using Neko Sensei.
And when you're talking about the customers, right, you mentioned customer service and relevance. What is relevance? I want to understand that part a bit more.
So Neko Sensei is built to help the users to understand their finances much more better through insights, uh, through understanding the transaction that the user do. So relevance in this case is that when a user asks about, let's say, what's my spending summary, Neko Sensei gotta provide the actual spending summary to the user instead of telling the user, oh, the nearest McDonald's is 10 kilometers away. So that's on the other side of non-relevancy, right? So we still got to be relevant in terms of our response to the user.
Right, but how do you develop the relevance in the agent?
That's a very good question. So we do evaluation for our LLM as well, for Neko Sensei. We use LLM as a judge. So separately, we have built another system to just evaluate our other LLM systems. So it has a set of criteria where internally all the teams would define, what is score of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and what 4 means, what 5 means, a score of 5 means, and why it's relevant if it's a score of 5. So the LM as a judge knows this, and then it will have a standardized metric and rubric to measure the response of Neko Sensei. So it's a assimilation of all of our qualitative and subjective take on relevance. So we need to bake this into that LLM as a judge.
Now, interesting that you say that because I'm trying to understand, right? Earlier on, again, we talked about guardrails. When you're training or developing this relevance in the agent, what are those guardrails that you actually have to set? I mean, to prevent it from, again, going off the path. If a customer is asking, for example, I want financial advice in this and that, on my spending, where does it know how to draw the line?
I think trust is a very expensive currency, especially when working with Agentic, mainly because if you lose that trust, it's so hard to get it back. So that's why we gotta have guardrails in place to ensure that the Neko Sensei doesn't go off the chart. So give you an example. I talked about this earlier as well in the talk, is that we have multiple layers of guardrail. I think first thing first is we gotta catch all those prompt injection. People were trying to attack it, asking it to generate code, or even asking it, where to get powdered sugars, in a sense. So you gotta have that. You also need to define. Second layer would then be defining what Neko Sensei can do and cannot do, and all this have to be written well in the system prompt and ensure that it follows this step by step, so it can stay within its own character. And then third point, in terms of the layer itself, is to prevent role playing, because some users might not actually attack it in a sense. They are doing it in a way that is tricking, Neko Sensei to do certain things. So we take care of that as well. And all in all, if you combine this all together, you create a very strong guardrails. And another point in guardrail is that we want our guardrails to be deterministic. We don't want it to be probabilistic, like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. We want it to be deterministic so that it's more safer for the user.
This is really interesting because I think there are also some enterprises, I believe, or some teams who build the Agentic and then they say, okay, it has its functions, we've put up our guardrails and that's that. But how do you really push it to the test, how do you redline this thing and make sure that it can stand the test of time or even go beyond the limit?
These are the things that is keeping my team awake at night. Because one thing is that we see Neko Sensei as our baby, right? And when it's exposed to the real world, we want to see, how well it performs in the real world, whether it's hurting the user or not. That's why we have something called the crash test. We put Neko Sensei to the crash test. And one of the way that, for cars is to just crash to the wall and measure how well it handles, right? For us, we use something called red teaming. Put it to simple terms, you will be running automated tests to just attack it, give it some weird prompt, ask it to do things that it's not supposed to, just trying to break it and trying to hit it until it fails. If you ask me, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but we have confidence after we run this. We know that it can handle well in the real world.
Right, and I'm sure that you have to find a specific group of individuals who are able to do that and be creative with it so that you can really test it in all facets, right? So how different is this compared to, let's say, back when we had setting up websites and you had to do UATs? How different is that from that?
The thing is, we don't use people to do this anymore, so it's very automated. So we wrote pipelines that also use LLM to generate these test cases and then firing them at Neko Sensei. So it's very automated, and very, I would call it scalable as well. When because you can do it, 10,000 times to fire towards Neko Sensei. And some of the simulations that we do is that we have an agent that actually adapts to the response of Neko Sensei and actively trying to find loopholes and trying to attack it. So exposing more and more, as the conversation goes on. And if you want human to do that, yeah, sure you can, but human gets tired, and there's cost involved as well if you use human to test it. So we use a pipeline to do that.
Right. So in this case, the tokens would be cheaper.
So what we get is the cost of the token, I guess. Yeah, the token will be cheaper, yes.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, considering the rate that you're pushing out and firing all these questions at it, right? If it were a person, that person doing it 10,000 times has to think of 10,000 different ways.
That's a scary person.
That is a scary person with a lot of time on their hands.
Yeah, like, whoa, what are they doing? What they do is just to break things, yeah.
I can only imagine the person sitting there in the dark basement just thinking up of every single thing I can do to destroy the system.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, actually this is one of my hobbies now, to try to break other people's conversational AI.
Are you talking about, okay, is this for different banks now?
No, I cannot say that. I just love doing that, exposing vulnerabilities.
Right.
I love that.
What have you found so far?
What have I found?
Yeah, I mean, look, whether or not this is a personal hobby or not, it's still good for, I think, anybody who is in the security side to actually see it. Because, again, sometimes when we get too close to it, we don't see it. We take it for granted. And like what you said, you can run 10,000 simulations, but it only takes that one to break it.
Yeah. I think for my example would be that one of the recent conversation AI that I test in Malaysia, local bank as well, the agent itself says that it cannot talk in Malay. So I take that as a challenge. I'm going to make you talk in Malay. So eventually it did break. I think one of the ways that I did was I asked it to imagine that we are now in a kitchen. Tell me about, what's in this kitchen and what this kitchen can do and cannot do. And slowly it exposes a lot of things to me within this kitchen, using kitchen as an analogy. But to me, human, I can understand, what it actually means. And then eventually, I just ask it, explain everything again in Malay. And it does. It explains everything in Malay, even when it says it cannot talk in Malay.
Why is that so?
Why is that so?
I mean,
right?
from your end, I'm sure that you already understand where the layers are, and perhaps is it because it wasn't able to backtrack to that point, it refreshed itself or something like that? What happened?
I think you got it right.
I'm guessing because there's only there's a limited memory, right, of the number of prompts. Is that what happens?
Actually, that's what makes you the human. You see it, you understand why it breaks already, and you got it point. You got the exact point. As we mentioned earlier on, right? We have misconception about agent, and this is one of it, where they have memory issue, they cannot keep track of conversation, then they will hallucinate. And second point is that at the end of the day, like I keep mentioning, it's just predicting the next word. So it might not be able to recall, what he had said before. So that's why it breaks, when you're putting it to the extreme test. Yeah.
Okay.
It just gives up.
So apart from the memory aspect being one of the weaknesses or the chinks in the armor, what else have you found? This is fascinating.
So it's not as smart as your typical interrogation to humans, right? Humans maybe can withstand, and maybe they would just not even give up, But for agent, it's very easy to give up. So what I learned was that from all of this, we gotta make Neko Sensei much more resilient. I cannot expose, what we did, but essentially, from all of this learning, it's baked now into Neko Sensei to be able to handle all of this.
Hypothetically, building a strong agent will require resilience. If you could share some of that wisdom without revealing the secret sauce, what would be those maybe top 3 things that they need to have as maybe key pillars or strong foundations?
2 things, I think. One is, I go back earlier, safety has to be deterministic. So you got to find a way to catch this in a deterministic manner. So it could be using code to just filter the conversation, using code to catch certain things, because code is very deterministic. If you leave it to an LLM sometimes will be like, oh, this one can, this one cannot. So you got to use code to catch that. So that's one thing. Second thing is, we learned this from OpenClaw, which is a concept of what we call soul. human has soul. Maybe agent needs to have soul as well. So we built this into the agent itself that, hey, you got to stick to this persona that we give you. This is how you behave. This is your name. And you live in this, everything about it. You got to define within this document and then infuse it. If you have 5 agents, you got to infuse it into all of the 5 agents. So all of them has consistent behavior. So when one agent fell, maybe the second agent can still catch it. Each agent that we have, they need to be aligned in terms of who they are, using something called the soul document that we have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of them would behave the same way.
Okay, so that's like the backbone architecture, rules and regulations for that particular agent itself.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much for that. I think a lot of interesting insights here, especially what's been happening over at AEON and how you've built that agent, or the team has built that agent, and potentially the future of how we can build stronger, more resilient agents as well. That camera is yours. Feel free to just let everybody know how they can connect with you and, of course, what's happening over at AEON.
Hi guys, you guys can find me on LinkedIn, George Wong, at AEON Bank. So incredibly proud of the team that has managed to roll out Neko Sensei today. Today is the day that actually we roll out to everyone to use. Neko Sensei is something that we've built for some time and very proud of it. The team is very proud of it. And the key point is that we want to help you to manage your finances better, understand more about your finances better, and see how we can be a guardian angel in terms of managing your finances. If you have not tried it yet, download the latest AEON Bank app and give it a try and let us know whether it works for you or helps you.
And would you accept the open challenge of people red teaming Neko Sensei?
Please do.
Okay.
And I'll be at the back just watching.
So you've heard it. Challenge is open. Go ahead, check out Neko Sensei, and of course, test it out. Red team it for yourself and see how resilient it is. Because at the end of the day, I think it's okay to make mistakes to an extent, but it's also good to know how resilient the app or the AI agent is going to be as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was a wonderful conversation with George of AEON. And thank you so much for listening. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Continue to support the ATxEnterprise Tech Unpacked podcast. And with that, we'll see you at the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.